In this video, we're going to be going through the Photoshop Workspace. And this is where it starts to get a little bit crazy, but just bear with me here. I'm going to go through all the basics in Photoshop and walk you into the Photoshop process very, very slowly. So one thing you have to keep in mind with Photoshop is that there are a ton of options in Photoshop, and a lot of them don't even pertain to photographers. For example, there's 3D, there's type, there's all sorts of things that you're not going to be using unless you're trying to get into these other fields. So in this course, I'm going to be breaking down all of the things you need to know about Photoshop that pertain particularly to photography. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead in this video and give you a short tour of all of the different components of Photoshop. I'm also going to show you how to create a customized workspace so that you can cancel out all of those other buttons that are going to distract you from just focusing on what you need to do for photography editing. So with that being said, let's jump into Photoshop. So the first thing you're going to do when you open Photoshop is you're going to want to go to this menu button, click Window, Workspace, and Photography. And that will get you into the same workspace that I'm in here, so we could start on the same page. So there's three main components of the Photoshop workspace that I want to go over with you. First off, we got the menu at the top here. Secondly, we got the bars, which is going across here and here. And thirdly, we got the panels, which are all over here. So let's go ahead and start with the menu. So if you click on the File section, this tab is mainly just going to be for opening your photos, closing your photos, and exporting them. So you're really just going to use this at the start of your photography process and at the end. The second tab here is editing, and there are a ton of different options in here. You're probably going to be using more stuff in here, so like content aware fill, transform, these auto blend, auto align, sky replacement. We're going to get into all of the stuff across this entire menu later, but I'm just going to give you a general idea of the things you might be using and what these tabs generally mean. Another thing I want to show you is at the bottom down here, you can access your preferences if you need to change anything. And one thing I would do right off the bat is I would go to your color settings right here and make sure Pro Photo RGB is set in this RGB right here. So if you access this, you can see that it is right here. And this is going to give you the widest range of colors possible to work with in Photoshop when you import a photo. Go ahead and click OK there. Another thing in the edit menu is this keyboard shortcuts, which can be helpful to learn and browse if you want to try and streamline your edit process. You can also edit these keyboard shortcuts in here if you want to change one that's a bit more particular to the way you work. I try to remember as many keyboard shortcuts as I can, but you know, it's more of a learning process as you go along. I'll slowly incorporate more and more. I wouldn't try and learn all up front because there's literally hundreds of keyboard shortcuts. So let's go into the image section here. So the main things you're going to be doing here are adjustments, which are little, edits to the photo. You can also do the image size, canvas size, and rotation here. Anything that pertains to the image right here. The layers section is going to pertain to the layers down here. And you could add new adjustment layers, masks, merge layers, all of that kind of stuff in here. Get into that a bit later. Type, I don't really use unless I'm doing some kind of graphic design, so I generally skip over this. Selections are exactly like they sound. So this menu helps you select certain things. So if I want to select certain colors or a certain subject, or if I want to get really particular with what I'm selecting, we can use all these options in here. Filters are also another really popular option for photographers. So generally, if you want to add blur to your photo, perhaps you've heard of the Orton effect. If you want to distort it, add noise, reduce noise. If you want to add some texture or clarity, you can use the high pass. You can sharpen your photos. Liquify is great if you're trying to add a little bit of bulge to a rock or maybe decrease the size of something. All great options that we will go through later. 3D, I never use, so I would just skip over this section. View is all pertaining to how you're looking at your photo, so zooming in and zooming out kind of options. Plugins, if you have anything in addition to Photoshop, third parties that you want to work with. The Windows section here is probably one of the most important tabs here. These all are different panels over here. So as you can see, like the histogram is checked over here because it is open over here. Also have the layers and the libraries checked, so they're open over here. So if you want to open new panels, you can go through and click them in here. This is also helpful if you accidentally exit out of a panel and you want to go find it again. At the very bottom here, you can see there are the options and the tools which are checked. So this leads me to the second main component of Photoshop, which is these bars right here. So we got the toolbar, which is going down here. So if you select a certain tool, it will actually change this options bar up here. So these are two bars you always want to keep up in Photoshop because they basically pertain to everything you do. So whenever you click on a certain tool, you can see how its options adjust in this toolbar or this options bar up here. Finally, let's talk about the third component, which is all of these panels over here. So the panels are basically made so that you can drag them and drop them to customize wherever you want to land them. So I could drag this here. Perhaps I want to put this in a tab here. I could drag it there, or I want to move this entire panel over here, or even over here if I want to dock it. You just want to look for those blue highlights to pop up. And this allows you to completely customize your workspace. With that being said, let's go up to the top here and we could see all of the workspaces here. So since we were in the photography at the start, if I want to reset this back to the default, I can just click reset photography and it'll bring everything back to where it was before. All right, so let's go ahead and create our own customized workspace. So we're going to go up here to Workspace and we're going to create new workspace. So let's call this Intricate Workspace. So if we go up to the window here, we can now see Intricate's Workspace is up here in the customized workspaces. I already have a customized one called the lab, but I'm gonna start from scratch and show you how I designed mine. So let's just start by closing all of these panels right here because I am going to just completely start from scratch and show you what is actually necessary for photography. So let's go ahead and start building this workspace. So the first thing we're going to want to use is the layers. This is probably the most important. You're going to use this in every single edit you do. Photo layers, we're also going to go to and add a channels, which is going to appear right next to that there. And then I'm also going to go and use history. So channels are really good for selections, and history is good if you make a mistake, you can go back and see all of your history. That is our first group here. The next group, we're going to go ahead and add a bit more specific things. So properties, we're going to go ahead and add the properties tab up here. Let's go ahead and also add actions. These make your, these are basically shortcuts that you can add and create so that you can have a bit more of a streamlined process later on. So I keep those actions up there. And then I'm also going to add a plugin that I use called TK7, which is for luminosity masks, which is a whole thing. We'll get into that later as well. So we got these three up here. We got these three down here. And now we're going to go through and add one more bar down here. So the final things that I use are brushes. And I find myself using these more often than you would think. So I keep these up here. And then I also throw down a histogram just so that I can see this for reference. And this workspace is now saved. You don't have to hit a save button or anything. It is just under Intricate's Workspace. So now if I were to exit out of Photoshop and go ahead and reopen Photoshop again, it will pick up right where I left off. So I don't need to do any rebuilding of that. It is just set up and ready to go for the next time. So as you can see here, boom, the workspace is saved. And if I were to go to a different workspace, so I would go to back to photography, I can go now back to Intricate's Workspace and it will rebuild that for me. And those are the main components that I use in Photoshop to build and craft my workspace. So now we can start to get into the actual editing process of Photoshop. Let's dive in.